Hello there, Earthling. What do you say we do an active ribbon microphone review? Because that's what we're doing. This is the Rode NTR, an active ribbon. It costs around $800. I did buy this with my own dollary dues. If you want to check one out, I'll throw some links in the description down below. All of my recording settings will be listed in the description, as well as the doobly-doo. And now let's talk about what comes in this really nice and extremely heavy box. Of course, you're going to get the microphone. You get a dust cover, a microphone clip, a 5/8 to 3/8 inch microphone stand adapter, a little bit of documentation, as well as a 10-year warranty, and a couple of stickers. Then as far as the build quality, this thing feels really nice. It is super duper heavy. It has an all metal construction and a metal mesh grill, which has very minor give to it if you press really hard. As we go around it, there are no buttons or switches. On the bottom, you will find an XLR port, and whether you care or not, this is made in Australia. Then as far as the specs, I'm not going to read all of them to you, but I will have them listed in the description down below, and I will also have the graphs up on screen in case you want to pause and take a closer look at anything. Now I am spinning around the NTR to 90 degrees to show you the off-axis dead area. Continuing around to 180 degrees, this is the rear of the microphone. Continuing around to the second null area at 90 degrees, incredible rejection, and then rotating and ending at the front of the microphone. Normally right here I would include a plosive test, but ribbon mics are a bit more on the fragile side, and I have zero desire to break an $800 microphone, so I'm not going to do it. If you're using this microphone, just use a pop filter or have outstanding microphone technique and do your best not to pop this thing. Now I am right on top of the NTR to exaggerate the proximity effect, and here is how it's sounding. Now about 6 inches off of the mic with it pointed at the corner of my mouth, and here's how it sounds. About 1 foot away from the NTR. About 2 feet away from the NTR, and about 4 feet away from the Rode NTR. Now I am typing on a keyboard with Gateron blue switches to see how much of my voice versus how much of the keyboard it picks up. As if any gamer would buy a figure-8 ribbon microphone, but now I am typing on the SAD W and spacebar keys. Now here is how the microphone sounds about 6 inches away from my mouth in a relatively well-treated room. And now here is how the microphone sounds about 6 inches away from my mouth in a completely untreated room. Now I want to see how effective the microphone is at rejecting shocks, so I'll start by tapping on my desk to see how much of that it can reject. And then I will tap on the boom arm. I'm also going to tap on this microphone to see if there are any kind of resonant frequencies. Now let's hear the NTR next to a bunch of other microphones. This is the NTR 6 inches off with my gain on the Universal Audio X8 set at 33 decibels, 24-bit, 48 kilohertz. Let's hear the first comparison. First up, I am on the Shure SM7b, which is not a ribbon mic, but I'm about 6 inches off of the capsule, no presence boost, no high pass filter, gain is set at 59 decibels. This goes for about $400, and here is how it sounds. Let's go back and do some more. Back on the NTR, nothing has changed. This is a palette cleanser. Let's go to the next one. Now I'm on the SE Electronics Voodoo VR2, 6 inches off, gain still at 33 decibels, phantom power still on. This microphone costs about $500, and here is how this compares to the Rode NTR. Back on the Rode NTR again, so you can hear how this sounds. Let's do some more. Next, I am on the Royer R10, about 6 inches off. My gain is set at 59 decibels. This mic costs about $600, and here is how it sounds compared to the NTR. Let's do some more comparisons. I am back on the NTR for another palette cleanser just to clear out your ear holes. Let's hear the next mic. Next, I am on the Beyerdynamic M160, 6 inches off, gain set at 59 decibels. This microphone also costs about $800, so direct price competitor to the NTR, and here's how it sounds. Now I'm back on the Rode NTR yet again. Here is how it sounds. That is enough talking. Let's go to another microphone. Now I am on the Shure KSM313N/E. I think I got that model name right. I am 6 inches off. Gain is set at 59 decibels. This microphone costs about $1,300, so quite a bit more than the Rode. But here is how this compares to the NTR. Let's go back and do 2 more comparisons. This is your penultimate palette cleanser on the Rode NTR. Here is how it sounds. Let's go to the second to last mic. Next, I'm on the AEA KU5a, 6 inches off, gain still set at 33 dB, and phantom power is still on. This is a super cardioid active ribbon. This costs about $1,500, so almost 2x the Rode. And here is how this sounds compared to the NTR. Let's do one more comparison. And here is your final palette cleanser on the Rode NTR, 6 inches off, gain at 33 dB. Let's jump to the last microphone right. Now I am on the Neumann U87 Ai. I am 6 inches off, cardioid pattern, no pad, no filter. Gain is still set at 33 decibels. This microphone costs $3,700. It is also not a ribbon mic. It is a multi-pattern studio condenser mic. So this is a fair and direct comparison, not a control. Also, the hello Neumann is a reference to Seinfeld because he says hello Newman, and Newman sounds like Neumann. Let's go to the music test. This tech stuff, even though I know that it will kill us all. This note just goes on and on and on and on and on and on. I know, that is a terribly awful, awkward ending to a phrase and a song. I didn't think through it. Should have held the note when I got back to the root or tonic. I didn't do that, so my skin is crawling, and I am going to let you live with that awkward skin crawly feeling as well. So that's your Halloween gift. So let's go to the conclusion now. I think that including clips of Anthony Fantano was a bit played out here, so I will just say, oh gosh darn it, boy is she a thick one. It's gonna need some EQ, I think. And first up, as far as pros, this thing has a super high output. That's thanks to the active electronics, and that means even though this is a ribbon, the preamp that you use really isn't going to come into play when we're talking about noise. Also, because this is a figure-8 microphone, the off-axis rejection on this thing is insane. It is so good. And then I thought the shock rejection on this thing was also pretty solid. But then as far as cons, I found that the bass and low mids on this thing are quite overpowering, so either you're going to need to use this microphone a little bit further away from the sound source to reduce the proximity effect, or you're going to need to rely pretty heavily on EQ with a high pass filter and maybe even an additional cut somewhere between 100 and 200 hertz to bring down that very exaggerated and thick low end. Also, this is more of an FYI than a con, but this thing is not just thick in the low frequencies, it is very heavy. So make sure the stand you are using this with can handle that. It's over 2 pounds. And now, what are my overall thoughts and opinions of the Rode NTR? As far as the overall sound, I will say it again, this is incredibly thick in the bass and low mids. I find it to be overpowering, and in every single instance and use case, I found myself wanting to EQ those frequencies down because it's very difficult for me to get a good sound using a microphone 1.5 feet away. The mids on this thing are relatively neutral compared to a lot of other ribbons which have a more mid-forward sound, and then like most ribbons, this does tame some of those higher treble and air frequencies, but it's not overly dull, and if you throw on a high shelf on this thing, it can bring those frequencies right back, and it handles that really well. On the electric guitar, I think this microphone worked quite nicely. Again, the low end is overpowering. You will need to clean that up, but I intentionally used a very twangy tone and it didn't get overly piercing, and that's thanks to the softer top end. It handled those sharper sounds really well. On the acoustic guitar, I have no idea why, but I want to say this sounded earthy. That just came to mind when I was listening to it. It's just something about the texture. Again, low end, it's very deep, it's very round. You will need to clean that up. The mids are nice and neutral, and if you throw on a high shelf, it can bring a ton of life back to that instrument. Then on singing vocals, I thought this thing sounded awesome. I know I sound redundant, but I loved the texture of this thing. It was nice and smooth, but it wasn't overly dull and dead sounding. It just softened up the voice nicely, and if you want a bit more brightness, you can add that high shelf back in, but the low end is overpowering. You're gonna need to EQ it. And finally, for spoken word, I think I've said everything, but the low end is very heavy. You likely will need to high pass it. It has a relatively neutral midsection for a ribbon, but it is still a little bit closed off compared to condenser microphones. And then you get that softer and tamer top end without it sounding overly dark or overly dull sounding. And to wrap up, would I recommend the Rode NTR? Both yes and kind of. If you're looking for that classic super bass and low mid heavy ribbon sound, but you don't want to have to worry about your preamp because it has an actual healthy output, and you are okay with the figure 8 polar pattern where it picks up sound from the front and the back, then I think this is really interesting. However, I find the low end to be a bit too overpowering for my personal taste and the environment that I am in, because I would need to use this quite far away, and my space just isn't good enough to really handle that. But if you have a better sounding room and you are able to use the microphone further away, or maybe you want that super robust low end because of the proximity effect, then I think this is a really nice offering because it does have those active electronics, and I really like the character in the mids and the treble and air frequencies. But the reason I'm saying I only kind of recommend this microphone is this costs $800. It is a figure 8 active ribbon microphone, and it does offer that classic ribbon sound. But I'm slightly partial to the sound of the SE Electronics Voodoo VR2, which is also a figure 8 active ribbon microphone. The low end in the bass and low mids is slightly more controlled, and you get more extension into the treble and air. It just sounds a bit more finished to my ears. But if you prefer the sound of the Rode NTR and you're looking for that figure 8 active ribbon microphone, I say go for it. But as I point out with every figure 8 microphone, just remember it does have a rear lobe of sensitivity, so you need to pay attention where that's pointing.